Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm delighted that so many of you can join us this morning. My name is Natalie Orange, and I'm CMO for Vuelio. I'm here today with two very distinguished guests, and we're going to be talking about how PR and communications executives are thinking about the future and starting to move from crisis thinking into preparing for brand recovery. So this is going to be quite an intense sort of 30-minute call. In terms of what we're going to be covering off, I actually just want to kick off with some of the research that we've been conducting at Vuelio. Before I get into that, if you would like to take part in the conversation, if you would like to add any questions, please do use the question box on the webinar screen that you've got in front of you. We'll also be promoting this on social, so there are some links for you to join the conversation. So just so that you've got an idea of what we look like, here are a snapshot of our shots and also links to the Twitter handles for our two guest speakers. I'm absolutely delighted that we're joined by David Jinks, Head of PR and Publications at ParcelHero, and Liz Slee, Head of Media at Enterprise Nation. Both are really at the coalface of how organisations are having to deal with the COVID response. David at ParcelHero, who've seen just an exponential increase in terms of their commitments and also the challenges they've had to face with meeting the demands placed upon them. And Liz, who works at Enterprise Nation, a small business support network, who's obviously counselling businesses who've gone through a complete transformation in what their businesses can do. So, in terms of the agenda, we're going to now jump in to talk about insights from the Vuelio Barometer, and then we'll end up in about 10 minutes with an extended Q&A where we can talk directly to Liz and to David about what they've been seeing and some of their learnings that they'll be applying to how their communications move forward. So just to shape this conversation, I want to kick off by talking about the research we conducted at Vuelio with our sister company Pulsar. Now, Pulsar is a social media analysis platform. And what we've done is look at 6 months of social media conversations conducted by 897 heads of communications and PR, really to understand the leadership characteristics people were displaying, the behavioural traits that they were sort of conducting on social media, and then also their outlook in terms of the conversations and topics. And I guess what's very interesting about the leadership, our industry leadership who are active on social media, is that we can broadly see that there are 9 personas within the cohort active. And the most important cohort, the largest cohort, are people who've gone online to develop their skills, to build connections and build associations. And actually that's the demographic that have been much more active through Q2. And that's interesting when we think about the conversation volumes that have been happening. So this rather challenging graph, and obviously I'm a PR, so ideally I would have written this out with 1,000 words. But instead, this is looking at conversation volumes through the days and a quarter, comparing Q4 2019, Q1 2020, and obviously we're midway through Q2 2020. And the real takeaway from this is that volumes of conversation on social media amongst that executive cohort of senior PR leaders have really almost increased exponentially through time. And what we're seeing is that there are much more conversations being had by people who are going onto social to share information, share knowledge, and share understanding. And that's interesting when we think about actually how topics have shifted over that period of time. So back at the very early stage of Q4 2019, well, actually themes like where should I invest, how should I build my leadership, what role should our organisation be playing in terms of charity, how important are the media to us? Well, they were defining much more of the conversation, the share of voice amongst that cohort of PR and comms leaders. But actually, what we've seen through Q4, Q1, Q2 is that almost those conversations have fallen away because COVID continues to really over-index in terms of defining share of voice. It is still the most important topic that is reshaping and redefining our industry. I mean, of course, you know, there can't really be any sort of surprise around that because of the scale of the crisis and the impact that it's had on every single business, every single part of our economy and society. But I guess what we can see is that we're seeing a real shift within our leadership to starting to talk a lot more about recovery. So it's almost as though we've come through the eye of the storm, and now actually leadership are starting to talk a lot more about what does recovery look like, how do I start to best sort of skill my organisation to be ready for what the future could look like. And I guess that's interesting in terms of thinking about what the industry has seen and what businesses have seen, and that we have weathered the storm, we've learned a huge amount, and actually now what we're looking to do is apply those learnings to thinking about how do we sustain growth and protect brand reputation going forward. I guess one theme that we also did draw out, which, you know, again, might not be that much of a surprise, is that in terms of share of voice around trust, and these are all topics that were indexed according to whether they reference governments, institutions, planning, policy. Well, actually, those conversations have really fallen away. And I guess that is also reflective of this sort of question mark about how well the government has performed in terms of communications, in terms of consistency, and bringing people along. So I've rattled through the research, and I have a terrible trait of speaking very quickly, but I guess we're very happy to share this research with everyone who's joined the webinar, and it is available through our website. But what we wanted to do was really just give you a snapshot of how has sentiment changed amongst PR and communications leaders. There is no doubt that COVID continues to absolutely redefine our sector, but I guess what is also positive for us is that we're starting to see the shift from action to recovery. Industry prepares for lockdown easing and really returning to business as usual, although of course we all know that usual will be a very different kind of usual. I guess how we really wanted to use this discussion today, and why we're so delighted that Liz and David are on the call, is that now now the kind of lesson for the industry is what is going to tool us up to be most successful. What are the plans? What should organisations be thinking of? And really, I guess from us, in terms of looking at what's resonating amongst our community, and even if we think and we reflect on what's been going on from a policy perspective in the last week, there's a real need for brands to be both agile, aware of the opportunities and risks that could really change the way that their organisations operate, but throughout really authentic and connected to key audiences. And I guess that's something that we sort of wanted to come on to talk about today. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into a Q&A. And if I can, maybe just ask a question directly to Liz to kind of kick us off, which is maybe to give us a snapshot of what it's been like at Enterprise Nation, and some of the, what it felt like at the immediate sort of outbreak of COVID.
Well, hello, Natalie, and hello, everyone. Enterprise Nation, we've kind of, as you were sort of mentioning earlier, we've really been at the coalface of all of this. We've got 70,000 small business members who look at us every day, and actually probably more than that now, considerably, because actually we've seen a 200% increase in volumes coming to our website and, kind of looking for advice. And I think you were talking a little bit earlier about, kind of how the government's performed in terms of its communications. And certainly what we've been hearing from small businesses is that, that communication has been, kind of quite difficult. And everybody understands why that has been the case. But actually what we've been focusing on at Enterprise Nation, and this wasn't necessarily something that we were doing a huge amount of before this all started, is kind of disseminating all of that and turning that into sort of something that small businesses can actually use. And in fact, we've expanded our team in order to be able to do that. And we've brought in Dan Martin, who has been able to sort of, he's looking at what's happening, what the government is saying, and disseminating all of that and distilling it into bite-sized chunks that businesses can, look at. And so, we're sort of adapting our own Enterprise Nation, our own kind of business model in order to be able to sort of deliver that sort of information, as well as, kind of advice and, kind of case studies around, small businesses that are really kind of feeling it. And so, yeah.
And David, I mean, I know we sort of talked a bit, but maybe is that reflective of what you've seen at ParcelHero in terms of a need to sort of distill and then disseminate government policy into something that could be actioned by your community?
Yes, indeed it is. I mean, it was quite interesting. I mean, looking back, I did my first press release about this way back on January the 27th, which was just about the sort of whether people should be at all worried about receiving parcels from China and whether they should be wiping them down and things. And there was almost a kind of, not a tongue-in-cheek, but I don't think any of us were taking it that seriously at the time. It was just a sort of reassuring message. But as the whole situation escalated, obviously our message needed to change quite a lot, especially when the government started to introduce new regulations concerning, doorstep protocol and whether you could have to sign for deliveries and things like that. We were dealing with those kinds of issues. And then especially when lockdown came 23rd of March, that was fascinating because suddenly for us, obviously business had been escalating rapidly because people have been sending PPE equipment, They've been sending food parcels to people in isolation. And suddenly on that day, everything suddenly dropped off a cliff for us for that day. And we thought, oh dear, this is going to be bad. But from the day afterwards, suddenly it really started to rise again. But I think what people were trying to do and businesses were trying to do was come to terms with what the lockdown meant for them and what they could do and what they couldn't do. Because obviously there were many companies could do web sales and the home deliveries, which was what started to really boom. So within about a week, we were at Christmas levels, and now we're at sort of nearly double Christmas levels. Mm-hmm. But obviously, all of our customers had to respond to that and sort of take that into account and work out what they could do and how many people they could have in distribution. And we had to send out reassuring messages to customers about protocols and about safety, and talk businesses through how they can step up their e-commerce distribution.
And Dave, so Liz, reflecting on David's experience, have you found that you've had to change the way that you communicate to stakeholders? Have you changed almost even thinking about how you process information and then publish it to your different groups?
I think we have, and what sort of David was saying about because we sort of noticed things were going a bit kind of strange, and we were getting a lot of businesses approaching us sort of at the end of February, and I think that was kind of businesses with issues with China or kind of businesses in China. But yeah, I mean, in terms of sort of how we've kind of started to communicate, a lot of the sort of in terms of PR, we were asked a lot for our kind of opinion on things because we're right there with all those small businesses, and so we've kind of had to kind of keep an eye on all of that kind of government stuff going on, and also sort of I think partly one of the things that we wanted to avoid, because what it's like when you're sort of speaking to journalists, they quite often want the kind of the unpleasant sort ofness and the difficulties that businesses are experiencing, which is absolutely right at the beginning. We were helping with that, and kind of in order to be able to sort of make things different. I think on March the 3rd we called for the British Business Bank to get involved and start to lend to small businesses, because we were already seeing people laying people off. And there was no furlough scheme then. There was nothing. But yeah, now I think not only do we want to sort of try and keep things more positive in terms of kind of moving out and back to recovery, but the last thing, business is all about confidence, and we want to sort of it's difficult, but we want to sort of try and get kind of journalists to start talking about positivity, and kind of we've done a lot of tips and kind of a huge amount of advice, kind of hugely kind of boosted our advice capacity in order to be able to sort of deliver proper advice on. We've got a huge amount of thousands of advisors on our platform now, and so it's about kind of getting that message out there that there is somebody there to help you, and that's quite a challenge, as we all know as PR people. It's quite a challenge to get somebody to talk about positive things, and so we've kind of developed quite a lot of sort of commentary, tips pieces. And kind of our sort of when I'm speaking to journalists, we've always got that one eye on actually yes, we can give you somebody who's just closed the business and is having a terrible time, but actually we can also we want you to talk about this as well, and I think that's what we're doing now is kind of creating and talking about all the good stuff that's happening out there and all the positive stuff, which there is a lot.
And how receptive have you found? Do you think the way that journalists are engaging with Enterprise Nation has changed kind of through the crisis? And do you think that's reflective of broader trends in what's going on in newsrooms? If you're thinking about how much pressure newsrooms are under.
I mean, it's interesting because I was involved with the campaign Startup Britain, which was sort of launched in 2011, and at that point we were in the midst of a massive recession, and as a consequence of that, I guess businesses, even the EFT had the small business correspondent, which they don't have now, and since small businesses and startups were the sweet spot in terms of the business landscape in terms of, they were very positive and, people could relate to it. And also in the backdrop of that, big businesses were not doing well. And so, we were kind of the positive element of that. But of course, since then, big businesses have kind of come back and there's been a huge recovery. And, a lot of those kind of small business correspondents have been removed from, people, bigger sort of kind of media outlets. And so it's quite hard to get stuff in. And it's even harder to sort of get positive stuff in. But I feel like that is turning, and I do genuinely feel that the tide is turning, and journalists are now looking for specifically kind of the sort of light at the end of the tunnel. We all are. And so as a consequence of that, we are seeing them come to us for not just sort of to moan about something, to actually sort of deliver a positive message. We've always have actually delivered positive messages. We've never kind of been one for sort of moaning on and unless there's a real kind of huge issue and an injustice to fight. We always try to sort of look at the positive side of things, because actually it's in everyone's interest to sort of ensure that we have that level of confidence in business.
And David, kind of reflecting, I mean, so maybe moving away from thinking about that direct kind of engagement with the media, how do you think the perception of PR and communications has changed within ParcelHero? I mean, was it something that was highly valued by your leadership team before the crisis happened, and has that changed when we think about where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was. I mean, we use, PR and comms for various different reasons, including things, because we're mainly an online company, so things like link building and things like that. So we have all sorts of reasons why we do a lot of PR and communications. So we want to be obviously sort of at the forefront of a lot of these sort of conversations. But I think one of the very interesting things was we had a look at the way that our Twitter sort of feed was being used and responded to, and we thought very quickly, well, we're not going to be able to get across our main PR messages and things like that using the Twitter, because a lot of our customers were just using it really to say, where's my parcel? Because so many things were disrupted in terms of international parcels, because I don't know if people know it, but say 50% of express parcels are actually flown in the belly hold of passenger aircraft, and they were all grounded suddenly, so everyone's wondering where their parcels are. So Twitter really sort of became a sort of more of a sort of feed for just customer services. But in the meantime, I started to work closely with customer services to see where the snags were, what the situation was and how it was evolving, so that I could then make comments to press and on the radio and things about exactly what the situation was, what countries were sort of having difficulty getting parcels in and things like that. So yeah, I think that PR suddenly rose drastically up the scale. Also, just getting the basic message across. Look, it's business as usual. We're still delivering. Get it on the website. Get it everywhere you can. That it's still, we're still picking up. We're still, delivering, and it's. Most businesses will be able to continue at least online, which was a key message for everyone in our industry.
And Liz, I mean, actually, we've just had a question in around this kind of alignment or merger between internal and external communications. I mean, did you see that also at Enterprise Nation, where you were seeing? I mean, I guess it's different when it's more of a sort of a network of small business support. Were you seeing that there were more people come to you across social media, and that was changing then maybe some of the external strategies that you were deploying?
Well, I think we've always had a huge kind of following on Twitter, and we've always kind of had that avenue for people to get in touch with us. But actually, one of the things that we did in order to sort of reach and really react quite quickly to sort of members who were coming with questions was we set up a coronavirus kind of section on our website, which was a live section, which meant that people could kind of come on and ask a live question, and we could respond to them quickly online without sort of interfering with too much with kind of the social media feeds and things like that. And so that was something that we hadn't done before, and that was quite useful, because I think the last thing you want is for your kind of, I mean, obviously really important questions we would have shared, with on Twitter anyway, in terms of, messaging and helpfulness. But actually, I think we brought all of that onto our website so people could just engage. It's almost like a forum, I guess, a kind of good old-fashioned, online forum. But, that's how we kind of dealt with it. And that was a really useful way, and I'm sure we will continue to do that. Hashtag Brexit.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess that takes us on to thinking about the future, and one of the questions that I was really keen to get both of your perspectives on is what do you feel you've learned through the COVID crisis that you're now going to be taking into sort of comms planning for the future? I mean, David, do you maybe want to kick us off with the view at ParcelHero about how your comms strategy is likely to change going forward?
I think basically it's about keeping things flexible. I mean, we had a PR plan at the beginning of the year that was about discussing technology and about discussing the potential impacts of Brexit, however it fell. And we, within a couple of months, we'd had to rip all that up and start again. And so we obviously had to be prepared to and keep ensuring that our message was current, and that we were following the different stages of this whole epidemic as it went on, and we were sort of giving tips for anyone sending parcels and all the businesses that use it, and really it's really our basic message was that the front door has become the front line in the fight against COVID-19. So that was really our sort of a key message, and it was really just reinforcing that in various different ways, but just preparing to keep flexible on that. I mean, say even this week, we probably all thought we were going to be talking about COVID-19 all this week, and suddenly things like Black Lives Matter. So it's suddenly a big issue for anyone working in comms. So you just have to be aware that suddenly topics can change, and that you really have to be able to respond very quickly as situations develop.
And Liz, that sort of agility in terms of communications response, is that something that you're sort of trying to factor in at Enterprise Nation?
I think we've always been reasonably agile in terms of kind of reacting to what's happening, because especially over the last few years, because we've just had Brexit hanging over us all of that time, and that's obviously been a huge thing. But I guess in terms of the way that small businesses might be thinking about their kind of comms strategy moving forward. Just as David was saying, online is going to be, just from our members' point of view, they're all, even if you're a corner shop, bakery, you're going to need an online e-commerce platform, presumably, which means that you can, you need to start thinking about different audiences, I think. You need to start sort of, kind of reaping those social channels and leading back to your kind of online offering. And yes, as David was saying, kind of being adaptable. I think that's the key. All of those kind of plans that we're kind of preparing are around strategic kind of things that we're doing within the business, and plans that we've got in terms of moving forward. But there's also going to be always that kind of element of flexibility in order to sort of be reactive. And be able to sort of comment on them. That's always been quite important for us. And also, I think, the other sort of learning is that, being able to, kind of take time, certainly for us at Enterprise Nation, being able to, respond quickly, and, there's a huge appetite for that. And I think, because, as we were saying, the government's kind of comms have been quite difficult to understand. We've had this role where and developed more of a role in terms of kind of working that being able to sort of translate that for businesses, because otherwise they're really struggling. And so that's something that we've learned hugely, is that there is a huge place for that. And that's been really successful, and people want that. That's really, really important. Moving forward, and that will be a huge part of our comms moving forward.
It's really interesting, actually. Just reflecting that, David, I almost wish that the government had that had your phrase of "front door is the new front line." I mean, that would have been much clearer than "stay alert."
That's the job, isn't it?
I guess just sort of conscious of time, and we've got just a couple of minutes left. I just wanted to almost wrap up with some of the reflections on the conversation and the themes, I guess, that have come through even from our research. And one of the strongest ones is that I think as PR and as an industry, we're really good at crisis comms. We know that we need a crisis comms plan, but actually it's very interesting when you try and then segue into planning for ongoing crises and actually how important it is that we build resilience into our organisations. And I think that's something to really kind of reflect on when we're thinking about how we work at every level, from, you know, media relations right through to guiding our internal stakeholders. This kind of need to give ourselves the kind of time to think about what could potentially come up, and also how do we make sure that we keep ahead of a very fast changing media policy and obviously sort of social media environment. And I do think probably what we're all kind of experiencing is that the crisis has absolutely crashed through some of the trends that we were experiencing. So, you know, the shift to social media being just as important as maybe engaging with media relations. And to both of your points, I think you've reflected on how important it is that you are digesting and making what's going on in the policy environment accessible to your organisations.
Absolutely.
So I'd just like to end by just saying, again, just a huge thank you to David and to Liz, who've given up their time for us today. It's really fascinating to hear from you. And also thank you to everyone who's joined the call. There'll be more resources available on our website, so please do, you know, head there if you'd like to find out any more about our research, or indeed find out more about Liz or David, and connect on LinkedIn. It just leaves me to say thank you once again to everyone who's listened in. To Liz, thank you again, and to David, thank you. And on that note, I'm going to end the call. Thank you.